Good afternoon. We welcome you to the last talk in the series on terracotta in India. So far, we have covered the architectural, regional, and historical context of the material. Today, we are excited to present an adaptation or innovation of the traditional terracotta to suit contemporary requirements. And for which I very warmly welcome Monish Siripurapu, who is an architect, and in his talk will present his work with terracotta in his practice and will be touching upon his explorations ranging from art installations and biomimicry to performance-driven building facades. He is also a TEDx speaker and teaches as a visiting faculty at the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. He has presented his works at various national and international forums, some of which are TMK Knowledge Forum, which was part of G20 Summit at Bali, and TMK is for Tri Hita Karna Knowledge Forum. Science Museum, London, UCL, Bartel, which is University College of London, and universities in Mexico and Barcelona. And also the Construction Symposium in Ekaterinburg in Russia. Quite a tongue twister, that. Russia, amongst others. His eco-friendly air cooling solution called the Coolant won the Asia Pacific Low Carbon Footprint Challenge, and it was funded by the UN Environment Program, UNEP. His works have been published across several renowned architectural journals and platforms such as History Channel, CNN, World Economic Forum, Architectural Digest, Art Daily, Inhabitant, amongst others. He is the founder and principal architect of Ann Studio that has won the Clean Energy Challenge by What Design Can Do in 2019 in Amsterdam, and has also received international recognition for work in nature-inspired biophilic passive cooling building envelopes. So that was his brief but very impressive introduction. And now for the actual talk, Monish, it is over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Am I audible? Thank you for having me here. It is an honor to be presenting here, and especially in front of Eli ma'am and Prashant sir, who actually taught me how to play with clay. And it's like, I think it was 10 years ago. First time, and actually, I'm really, thank you so much for teaching me to play with this wonderful material and for this wonderful journey. So, yeah, I'm the, Ant Studio is what we call ourselves. I'll just come to that. So today I'll be talking about terramorphic explorations and biomimicry. Terramorphic, I'm trying to see how we can actually play with terracotta in different forms, which I'll go a little bit more in detail. But like about our practice, we are a bunch of, I think, quite a lot of enthusiasts, architects, artists, designers, trying to work in this domain of art and technology, but trying to see how we can keep it around nature. I think that's where the ant comes into the equation. So like I said, terramorphic. So how we can try to balance, because this medium, I think, like I said, ever since I learned from my gurus how to actually deal with it, when I started off with the practice, it was more about like looking at the beauty more than the functionality of the material. I think it is something that as a material that really allows us to do is trying to play with, it is so flexible and malleable, we can actually create almost anything with the form. So there is one installation actually, it is not, the ultimate form was not part of with terracotta, it was done in fiberglass. But I think the first experience of how we played with clays, it's almost like a 10-meter long sculpture, and 10 meter by 3 meter by 3 meter is the volume of that sculpture. Wherein the entire formwork for the first time, actually we made it in clay. I think that's how I actually got to introduce to the material. So going forward today, like I said, I'll be talking about 3 parts. One, material and the form explorations, which is purely form oriented, so I will not talk much about it. I'll just skim through some of the expressions, and I'd rather leave it to that but not actually get into the detail of those because of the time constraints. But I'll talk more about this, the coolant, which is a product that we're working on, and the nature inspired passive cooling solutions and how Terracotta is playing a role in that. And the last part I'll be talking about is the bioreceptivity of the material, which is the beautiful, I mean the material bioreceptivity, and how it can actually play a role in air purification. This is a research project that we're working on, which I'll also touch upon very briefly. So, like I said, in the initial stages for me, it was more about trying to see how I can play with, wanting to learning new tools of parametric tools and see how brick can be adjusted in different forms, like a doubly curved wall, and more, like I said, how as an architect, my entire objective when I started playing with these tools, how can we like deconstruct the brick itself, which we are so used to, like, the standard brick bonds and all of that. How can we can bring in a little bit of technology. This was 12 years ago, and how we can try and playing with, just expression in exposed brick and all of that. So a lot of work in our practice revolves around exposed brick work and staying true to the material and using less of like plaster and cement and all of it, and trying to see how brick can become, like I said, trying to bring in new parametric forms, but using a natural material, not instead of going for anything that is synthetic or metal which have high embodied energy. Trying to see if we can actually use the same material for this expressive, like I said, forms, but not like I said, parametric forms, but using terracotta and brick. So this is another project wherein the whole idea again used to use this doubly curved wall to make a space for a factory wherein this factory works 24/7, and they wanted something really warm and something that is really robust. It was done 8 years ago, and then even if you walk in now, the space exactly feels the same. I think that's the beauty of the material, is that it ages really well, and because it's being covered, even the color and everything, it feels exactly the same even after like such a long time. There is, the amount of emissions from the paint or the materials and everything. I think that's what I really like about the material, is that it really stays true to the to the feel even after years and years of usage. So, like, the whole objective is how we can take this. Exposed brick is not very, it's nothing new, or it has been used for ages all the while. But then what is new is that how we can use this material for like new form. These are the images of the building that is complete. These are renders, and these are the real images. Like, you can see that there is a gradual, like a wave kind of patterns that we are playing with the brick bond, and how we can actually bring in new computational design tools into the design and create something that is, like I said, more expressive than a typical exposed brick wall. So far, like I said, it's all about form and trying to just play with the materials and all of it. Now, going forward, like this is the roof. I spoke about exposed brick so far. We have removed, this is a building in Noida where we have recovered from the roof, like all these tiles from the top, which were dismantled. What you can see is this Mangalore tiles. So the whole idea is that, even this, the way they stacked it, it's beautiful, because this Mangalore tiles, they have this beautiful interlocking system which I found here, and then said, okay, what if we convert that using the same principle of that interlocking and convert this into an art sculpture, which is absolutely like I said, again, trying to test how much cantilever we can do, what kind of forms that we can evolve with a recycled tiles, which otherwise would have actually gone into a landfill. So these are some other images of when the project was under construction. So how this interlocking and everything can happen, trying to see with the material. And this last part of the artwork, which I'll be showing, is this what we call as the pangolin pavilion. I have done this in the School of Planning and Architecture, SPA, where I studied recently, where I was talking about computational tools and how we can use these tools for teaching, but use natural materials for execution. So the whole idea is, pangolins, not just the form, but also how we can take pangolins. This was just before COVID. And so there is an article that we came across which said that in Gurgaon, they actually found an Indian pangolin, and they thought it's actually something really creepy and something really vicious. So they killed it. There's an article around it. And for me, and it's a perception, they thought it's scary. For me, I found it like really beautiful, and how this entire form that is there, it's like very biomimetic, and the beauty of it is extremely, I thought, that is because of a lack of awareness that this is just another animal. They have not seen it. So we said, okay, why not actually create something inspired by pangolin, so that we can also talk about these like animals, like, in the form and so on. So this is like CNC cut terracotta tiles assembled together, trying to show that, what we're trying to do in here is the same material can be done in, like, using the state-of-art technologies for some modern forms. So, like I said, so far it's all about form, and more about how we express beauty or like a narrative to the material. Like going forward, the second part of the presentation, I think I'll be talking about the how we are trying to readapt, remember the traditional techniques that are there in the past, and rethink how we can actually use it and readapt in modern construction. So this is what we're doing. So here, the whole idea is that currently air conditioning industry consumes a lot of energy. I think this is something that we keep hearing almost every day now, the harmful impacts of air conditioning and the vicious circle of how we trying to cool our spaces is actually creating global warming and how it's impacting the external environment and so on. So, and this is something for me, there are a lot of numbers on this, but I think here we keep talking about how 40% of the energy in the building construction industry is contributed because of the air conditioning. So, especially in India also, every year we keep saying that, there's a 15% rise in number of people. As a growing economy, more and more people are able to get to air conditioning. So, what are we doing about it? So India came up with a cooling action plan, emphasizing on the use of hybrid active and passive cooling solutions and so on. But this is the question. What I really wanted to, when I started thinking in this, the whole idea is actually how many buildings are designed by architects. A report states that it's actually less than 2%. And I still think that 2% is actually a very bloated number. And in that 2%, how many buildings are actually environmental friendly? How many people are actually keeping their emphasis on trying to make buildings sustainable? So that I think is a fraction of even further than 2%, which is I think total what we're talking about is a fraction of a number that's the impact of designed buildings by architects. So the whole idea is that, what if we start looking at buildings not as a service. I think the biggest drawback in our industry is that it's a service industry. So we talk about how scalability, unlike mobile phones and cars and everything, automobiles that we get access, you go in a day you get actually the products from the market. But that's not the case with buildings. That's not the case with how we look at our, the buildings. It's a service industry. It's a pain to actually, it's a labor one has to go through to get from a design from an architect till the execution. So that's what makes it not really accessible by the masses, by millions of people all over the world. I think that's the biggest drawback in the industry. So the whole idea is, can buildings, at least a component of that, can it be designed like products? Like the whole facade which people can actually pick from the market, and how we can and how, so that the entire thinking process of people can be reduced, and we start looking at how it can be pick and place. So all the thinking and everything is done back end, and you can actually convert a part of this industry into a product industry. So that's where we are looking at how cooling, especially the building envelopes, can be productized. That's where I'm coming from. So this is an installation that we have done. This is the first installation in 2015 I've done for a factory using earthen pots, wherein we were actually asked to do like I said, in front of a DG set to create an art installation. Like I said, we do a lot of artwork and all to cut down the to cut down the heat that is coming from this DG set. So what we propose, this is a first prototype, the proof of concept we made using a simple brick jali with running water on top of that. And then we realized that there is actually a substantial drop in the temperature. We took that and then converted that, made it more artistic and converted that into a beehive, which I'll show later. So the whole idea, so this was, like I said, it's a proof of concept. So we thought after doing this, why not use technological tools like CFD analysis and everything to measure the performance of the material, combine technology with what is otherwise a traditional craft, which we have been hearing for a really long time about how, we know traditionally that if you put water in an earthen pot, it remains naturally cool due to the latent heat transfer and how the water inside and all that. So the whole idea in this particular case is, can we use the same technique, but instead of trying to cool water, can we reverse the process and try to cool the air? So instead of using an earthen pot filled with water, can we actually make it like cones, a series of cones stacked one on top of another, and as the air passes through this and comes out, it's naturally cool. So so this is a first, like I said, the form is inspired by the beehive, so that we can actually increase the surface area on the outer and inner edges, and the water gets retained in the pores of the material, because terracotta being porous and also it's hydrophilic in nature. It absorbs water. Even when it is in monsoons, even without pouring water, it naturally remains cooler. So can we use the property of the material itself to create an art installation that is both functional and also the artistic at the same time? So, and yeah, this is how we started, and then we started seeing how we can actually take it to different places in different forms, introduce a metal grid in between so that it's faster and easier to assemble it really quick, and in multiple places, and so on. How we can. So we started looking at how this can be scaled up. Like I said, the whole idea, what I was talking earlier, is that how can we scale it and then productize this, rather than making it a service industry wherein a unique art piece for every installation. Is there a possibility to scale it? So like I said, it's a very simple system where we stack pots on top, run water, and then it keeps the naturally air and everything cool. So, but what we are really interested is that how can we use technology to, it's a GIF, it's not playing. So how can we use this analysis and everything to measure the performance of the material, and then scale it to into spaces to understand how we can even work on increasing the performance of this. So that's the whole idea. And then but then what this earthen pots, like I said, wherein probably I'll skip through this. I just spoke about how these pots are actually used for water, which we can use for cooling air. So after the series of experimentations, what we had done, we are trying to see if we can scale it up or condense it or streamline in such a manner that rather than looking at as intricate or art installations for buildings, can they actually become building facades that can be used in for any building. So this is a beautiful example which we came across. These are series of pots filled with water. This is actually an Egyptian, the pharaohs used to make the slaves fan the surface of these pots for cooling. And similarly, we all know that we have thousands of these examples where all the building envelopes in hot climates like Jaisalmer, in Rajasthan or Gujarat and many other places, where the building facades were designed to keep the thermal comfort inside the whole thing. It's very obvious that, if you look at a facade or the building envelopes, these are intricate jalis that are there. And the same thing if you go to Ladakh, where you have big windows but thick walls to retain the heat inside and so on. So all the buildings and everything are always designed to make sure that the thermal comfort inside is remained cool. But that's not the case as we keep moving, which I'll just check. And these are some of the beautiful examples, the Venetian blinds. But what it shows is that, this is a technique where the reeds from the river were taken, the roots, and then dried to actually, this is how the roots were dried to create this kind of a Venetian blind, what called as the sheesh. So traditional systems that are there, how the roots were actually used and then later converted into these jalis and blinds, how they evolved. It's a beautiful story. And then we see these mashrabiyas in the Middle East, like our jarokas in Jaisalmer, where these are intricate wooden windows where people used to sit. And it is both for privacy for women when they're looking at it, where for them to sit and look at the streets. And at the same time, it was designed in a manner that they used to put these earthen pots in the windows so that when the air passes through, there is actually this hot air circulation happening from outside. And it becomes a place for both social interaction and also cooling or functionality at the same time. So like I said, we also have this kind of jarokas where it used to happen in the past. But anything odd about this? Just a glass? So also the air conditioner and all. I think the whole, what's happening is that we somewhere we forgot about the reason behind these forms and how building facades were actually tailored for a functionality. I think we end up just looking at the beauty and just celebrating the beauty of it rather than understanding how the systems actually work. So because currently the problem is we believe that any building can be designed and then you put an air conditioner like a magic device and it's also cooling, the problems, without really worrying about the simple things, concepts of natural ventilation, passive cooling, air circulation, and then evaporative cooling and everything can follow. So this is exactly you take this, if you this can be any city. One cannot say that this can be any city in the world. That's what we call as the paradigm shift. We talk about technology and all of that. So is there any room for when we talk about technology, any room for culture and these practices that we are doing? Can we still talk about building facades that respond to a particular city or a location and the climate? And I think that is a missing link where we really don't look at because India, this is India, where it is diverse, where you talk about geography or the climate or or the way, how we wear our fabrics or the fashion, everything. It's very different from one place to another, and that's how even the buildings were designed. If you go even now, we look at all the touristic. We keep running to Kerala for beautiful houses to look at, or Tamil Nadu for something, and Rajasthan. And that's because of the climate and how even the fashion. Which when people talk about how the clothing and everything varies according to the climate, but that's not the case how it is happening with with the buildings. So the whole idea, what we are looking at when we speak about buildings is that can buildings, like, the facades actually, can they breathe? And what if building facades are actually designed like a second skin, like the fabric that we wear, that it reflects, like, the climate and the culture. And again, bringing the whole conversation back to how building envelopes as a product can actually tackle that. So drawing simple inspiration from natural processes, like I said, it's when you talk about biomimicry and trying to imitate nature, the most easiest thing that we do is copying the form and the shape. There's nothing wrong about it, but that's the easiest thing to do. And the other one is copying a certain process. And the third, I think, which is the most difficult part, is mimicking an ecosystem. How can we mimic? I think in this particular case, what we're talking about, so trying to see how we can mimic nature. For me personally, tree is the best example of beautiful shading, because as I shared always, whenever it's even hot on 44, 48 degrees summer day, you just walk under a tree, what you see is this beautiful, drop in temperature, drastic right away. And that's majorly because of this evapotranspiration that happens through the roots and the leaves, where that acts like both insulation and also this evaporative cooling happening, evapotranspiration within the tree, which at a larger scale is what really contributing to the balance in the ecosystem when you talk about the seasons, when we talk about the carbon sequestering and all of that, right? So what we are talking about is that, so I think this is, like I said, what if we have buildings just like the foliage of a tree? So what if the building envelopes, instead of being, like I said, what we are talking about, glass buildings and something like that, can we start looking at building envelopes the same way the foliage of the tree can behave? So this we are talking about, trying to see if we can mimic the leaf, the evapotranspiration on a leaf, and it happens, how the evaporation happens. What if this terracotta modules, there is an installation right outside where the water is stored within this. So each of this terracotta, this fins can behave like a tree, and there is evapotranspiration happening on all of this. So the system, this can actually act like an insulation on the building skins, and these can actually, instead of, so it acts in 4 different layers. One, like a screen that is cutting the heat that is entering the building, and they can be oriented at different angles so that you can actually cut it off according to different cities and the orientation of the building. You can adjust and play with the angles of this. And so, like I said, you can play with the porosity of this material and so on. So these are some of the the works that we are doing right now to see how we can mimic the foliage of the tree and then convert these aerofoils, which we kept outside. There is water running through this setup, within that, so that it retains the water, and then the water dissipates from the surface of it as the air passes through that. It's a very simple system, nothing very complex about it, but then it has a flexibility to, one can adjust the angles. It can be kinetic. We are doing one project for a client which is kinetic, but it can stick according to the orientation so that it's cutting the heat inside the building and so on. And these are some of the other examples of how we are working on, how we are trying to see that, how this can, these angles and everything we can play with for different projects. So this is another project where we are working on the southern facade. We have the screen, which act like both a privacy screen and also at the same time a facade that cuts off the heat with the terracotta. Again, the roof on the top is also the terracotta traditional jali, but designed in a manner that it's a modern interpretation of a sloping roof, and what we always have seen in traditional buildings, but then readapted to modern forms. So another installation where this is done, these leaflets can actually be regulating the heat depending on the day, the part of the day we can actually open and close these to regulate the heat and the light that's coming inside the building. This one. So I'm talking too much. Any questions? This is the last promise. I think I'll finish in next 3-4 minutes. Any questions? But in the meantime,
I have lots of questions, but maybe you should finish.
Yeah, I think I'll just skim through this. This is this is something we have seen actually. This is this beautiful moss and everything that grows on the surface of the pots. We have to do nothing, just let it be. And with rain and the weather and all, we actually get this beautiful moss growing on the surface of the pots. So for the first few years, we thought it was a problem. So in the installation that we did, in the Deki, the beehive, so what happened was that we thought actually something is wrong about it. So we used to add chlorine to water and everything to just kill it. So for the first installations and all that we did. And some people still don't like it. So we say, okay, if you want to kill it, it's really easy. You just have to put some salts and chlorine, it's going to take care of it. But then what we realize is it's actually a good thing. If we can amplify this process And by growing moss, because terracotta is beautifully biophilic. It's both hydrophilic and biophilic. I think that's where the magic happens. The moss, and it grows. You can actually amplify the growth on the system, the material, and that's where actually you can, these things start to come to life. I found it really beautiful, like this thing that can actually grow on top. So we started looking at how the system that we are talking about can be both as a cooling facade and also try and see if we can accentuate the air quality by growing this, the creepers and the plants, and trying to make it almost like a zero plastic, vertical garden on a building facade, but that can both generate cooling and also talk about, like I said, the plants and so on. So this is another installation, what we call as a coral. So this was designed to, the same cooling what we were doing earlier with the beehive, but 360 degrees. But again, so we started seeing if this can actually even become an outdoor system for air purification. Like if you can amplify it even further, the growth on these are ceramic ones, stacked radially, and wherein we are drawing all the hot air, clean it, becomes like an air washer. And and this is something that's a work in progress, the tower that we're working on using the same terracotta, but you wash the air and that is coming in, purify it of all heavy particles, amplifying the growth of moss on top of this, and then this can actually work in public spaces both as an installation and also a functional system. Like I said, it can, if not talking about the minutest particles, but it can still cleanse all the heavy particles in the air and create a local microclimate that is fresh around it. So yeah, I'll just skip through this. Thank you.
We should take questions now. Please wait for the mic to reach you.
So I have a bunch of questions.
Sure.
And I think they're all related to each other. One is, it is all made out of clay, and clay itself is very difficult to get now. So what is the cost, and where will all this clay keep coming from? That's one question. Then what is the life of all of these things? Because after all, it's only clay and it can break. And so, and what kind of care would one have to take? And then what about Delhi? Because half the time it's hot and half the time it's cold. So, I mean, what will happen in the cold weather? It's great for hot weather, but what will happen in the cold weather? Can you do it on existing buildings? Or, do you have to, I mean, as you say that hardly, like, our houses are hardly, architect designed. I live in some second, third hand house. So it's not, architect designed at all. So, I mean, I have all of these thoughts in my mind.
Sure. I mean, definitely, like answering your first question about the clay, where it is available and all of it. So, if you look at the initial part of the presentation where I was talking about the earthen pots and all that. So, this was done using like hand potters. Sorry, I have to go through a lot of these images. So, these are all earthen, can be made with potters on a grid. And so this we have, we are working with potters from Uttam Nagar, in Kurja, in Bhuj, in Pune, like a lot of different places where potters can actually make these for them.
If everybody starts making it, then there won't be enough clay.
No, there is actually, ma'am, the whole point is that clay is a material that we use for the bricks. It's the shape is changing from bricks. What we get typical, the material is there. I mean, if you are able to so we are talking about the same material that we use for this, but in a different form. And so clay, we are talking about, the functionality, because clay, I don't think, what is the difficulty is using the topsoil. The problem is not clay, because there is abundant clay, but the clay that is topsoil, which is actually fertile and which we use for agriculture, that's the problem, but not clay. So this material, what we are getting is it's not necessarily topsoil. And I'm talking about, which comes to the next question, because they are interconnected. The strength of the material also differs, the material, the clay itself, based on, so we tried a lot of experiments. For instance, this is handmade, and these are baked at the temperature of 700 degrees. So the life of this, I think after 3 to 4 years, it would deteriorate. It would chip off in some places and edges and all of it. And there are two ways of looking at it. One is that the life of it is really short. And the other way is that it actually disintegrates and goes back to nature, which I find it beautiful. Some people don't. They want really high return ROI, return on investment. So for that, in this particular case, unlike, because that's when we're talking about environment especially, the biggest problem is that we design for eternity. When you talk about materials in the product, we want them to last forever. I think that's where the real the problem comes into play. And in this particular case, what we are saying, let it, we are okay, this is really cheap. This potters, anybody can actually make it, it's not very expensive. It disintegrates and goes back to nature. And the other way, like I said, is that you want something to be industrialized, at least last, if not 3 to 4 years, but 20, 25 years. And clay we have seen archaeologically, and we are sitting, especially in this building, we are talking about conservation, and we have seen buildings clay lasting for decades and centuries if done properly. So that's where the next system comes into play, where we have industrialized the system, baked at a higher temperature, 1100 degrees, what we call as aerofoils, and they can last, we are saying that easily 25 to 30 years because of the method, the process that we are following for the clay, not handmade. So they're both the ends to that. If you can deal with the material, I think the life of the material is not a problem. So in that case, and talking about the accessibility and how we can make it on existing buildings, the whole idea of making these envelopes is exactly that, to make it a product that even on old buildings. Being an architect, what I want to do is people should cut this process of design and let the designers actually think about it. Even on old buildings and new buildings, this can be plugged on, like a plug-in system according to the orientation and the climate, and need not be on the entire facade. We can actually do it even very strategically at places where you want to cut the heat. So in all the buildings that I have shown you, we have proposed it only on the south and the west facade, where the maximum radiation is, not on the entire, all the faces. So in areas where it is needed, it can be done. And answering your last question about Delhi, at least now I think the cooling is only 2 to 3 weeks. But it's not, I think when I came, I used to wear the sweaters in October. But now even in December, we were walking, November and December, we were walking in shirts. And that's the problem, because that's all we are talking about, whole global warming and how seasons are changing and all of that. So the whole idea with a flexible system like this is that if we have a system and it can easily be regulated, the whole point of this technology is that they can be adjusted according to the sun angles and mathematically done, wherein you can let the sun in when you want and you can actually cut it off when you don't need it. So that's the whole beauty of this flexible louvers and all of that, that it can be adaptive according to the weather, the climate, which part of the day and all of that. So I think I hope I answered all your questions.
Well, maybe I can ask a quick question. What is it with Ant Studio, the name? Could you explain that?
I think when I first started my practice, the whole idea is that, even though we work a lot with these materials, I'm also inherently, I think my motherboard is technology. So I can put it that way. So I actually wanted, I see everything. I have done my the PG diploma in robotic fabrication. And technology, and you're talking about programming or other stuff, it's I love these two ends wherein you're talking about natural materials but tech. So one day just be having this random conversation with my friends on the streets of after college. And then we said, okay, let's imagine a situation. This is about when I was doing this robotic fabrication thing. I said, just imagine a future, you forget everything that was done in the past. Just you have technology and resources. And forget how people are making buildings and all of it. How would one do? That's the debate that we are having. Then came up this idea that, what if in the future buildings are actually like anthills, where this, robots are going and carving this beautiful space, sculpting the landscapes like ants do, and create this beautiful buildings which are extremely poetic, collective intelligence of the ants. So that's where the ant actually came from there, and later art, nature, technology. But the whole idea is, if we start imagining a future where everything is sculpted in landscape, but not necessarily like the way we do right now.
Yeah. So not imposed.
Not
harshly.
Imposed. Exactly. Just scoop out and carve out. Yes.
Fascinating.
Sorry? Yes, yes. Because like I said, we love terracotta, and that's how the ants work with the medium, mitti. So there was a connect. Yes, definitely, that was also a possibility.
Any more questions?
These materials, once the lifespan is over, you can't reuse it, or you have to merge with the nature?
It can merge, but also if there is a possibility of collecting them and putting back into together, the baked clay is actually good for as part of it medium. We still use it. All the waste that is generated during the manufacturing process, they crush it and use it as grog for adding with more clay to make it actually to reduce the shrinkage. So even the waste that is generated during this process after baking, let's say some material is actually at fault or something, so that can be recycled. But otherwise, if not, they can actually become like stone. I mean, if it might not, it won't be fertile because it's baked, but it can still become like back into the clay as this thing. So without having any harmful impacts on the the environment.
Well, I guess then we'll wrap up now if there are no more questions. Thank you, Monish. We have a small token of appreciation for you, which I request Member Secretary Dr. Shaden Mesra to hand over to Monish.
Thank you. Thank you.
Since this is the medium he works with. Since this is the medium he works with.
Yeah, you can.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can put it in that little bag.
Can I keep it here? I'll keep it here.
Thank you, Manish. And what was coming to my mind as I sat through the talk was that his work has a lot of aspects which align so well with aspects from INTAC's mandate. For example, he picked up a very traditional medium and material, and he put it to what we call the adaptive reuse. In a way, adaptive reuse to suit modern contemporary requirements, and succeeded in turning a heritage component also into an economic asset, and which I'm sure also for the larger benefit of the community, like you mentioned, the potters that you have worked with, and all of that. And not to, miss out the positive impact on the environment that this must have created and is the need of the hour. So thank you very much. And I am sure if we ever need a poster boy for INTAC, maybe we can contact him. But thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. We have tea for you outside. Do join us for a cup of tea. And with this, we wrap up our celebration for the Heritage Week. But our endeavor for heritage conservation continues. Thank you very much.